Hi, I'm Scott at ediblemusic.com. You know those vocal reverbs that sound so big, almost like they're lifting off from the actual vocal track? They sound enormous, but they don't get in the way of any of the vocals. These really smooth reverbs, I want to show you how to do that today. I'll set up a return channel first. We're working with the vocals in yellow, so I'm going to color these yellow as well. And as I set up this reverb channel, there's something important to know about the different parts of a reverb. There are what's called the early reflections, which are the initial bounces off of the surfaces surrounding. So say if you're in a bathroom and you clap or you let out a quick shout, you'll hear these echoes. Those are the early reflections. As you can already imagine, those are pretty different from that long tail of the reverb. That's a different part of the reverb. As those sound waves bounce around a little bit, they start to dissipate, the frequencies diminish, and you get this more smooth sounding tail. So when you're looking for a smooth reverb, you will probably want to de-emphasize the early reflections, but not entirely. One way that you can do that is actually first by setting up a delay channel. And this is going to come in really handy a couple of steps down the road. But first, the delay will act very much like early reflections do, because it will give that bit of a bounce after the vocal happens that will locate it within a particular space. Delays are really useful for that, and they work very nicely in combination with reverb. So we'll set up a delay first. Make them a slightly different length in each one, which is nice to create a bit of stereo information. And I'll EQ it a bit, just to remove some of the higher frequencies. That's pretty good. So we'll turn it down and just tuck it in underneath the vocal. Cool. Could try a ping pong as well. All right, so now let's get into the actual reverbs that we'll add to this. So I'll add another return channel, and I'm just gonna add a standard reverb. I want you to do the same thing in whichever workstation that you're working in. Just add a reverb. It will contain most of the same parameters as I'll be working with here. And it's important just to get familiarity with the default plugins and effects that you've got in your workstation anyway. So I'll color this yellow as well. Now let's just hear for a sec what this reverb is doing. Okay. Now, in order to get that smooth sort of reverb, the early reflections that I was describing earlier can sometimes get in the way of that sense of smoothness, because the early reflections are responding, they're the first respondents to the sound waves that are going traveling throughout a room. And so they can be much more active than the more diffuse part of the reverb, the tail of the reverb. And that activity that that early reflections can have can sound a little bit too much when you want to get that smoother sort of reverb that we're talking about. So I'm going to turn the early reflections off here, and I'll also turn them down. And you'll notice there that the reverb seems to darken a little bit. That's because the way that the sound waves will move through a room, the higher frequencies will dissipate much more quickly. So if you get rid of early reflections, then usually you're also getting rid of a little bit of that higher frequency energy. And in this case, that's okay, because if you have a lot of sibilants or consonants that are going through the reverb, then that can cause the reverb to have a lot of activity as well. It's nice to have a smoother reverb by removing some of the jumpiness of the consonants and sibilants that a vocal can have. You can also use a de-esser in front of your reverb, or a compressor if you like. The first move I usually go for is just to EQ things out or adjust the early reflections. Now, I'm going to extend the decay time a little bit longer. And now we can adjust the input. Just to get the tone of it to match the vocals a little bit. Now, to get some more movement in that longer reverb, what you can do is you can send the delay return channel also into the reverb. So both the vocal and the delay on the vocal will be feeding into it, and that'll add some really nice kind of waves that will travel through the reverb channel. Pretty nice so far. Now, to get that really nice tail, you'll want to add another reverb that is specifically designed to have that long cascade at the very end. So I'll add another one and turn this one yellow, and we'll add an additional reverb. This one won't have any early reflections on it at all. And we're going to extend the decay time really, really long. Now, that will make it sound longer, but we also want it to sound further away. And in order to make things sound further away, you want to have some lower frequencies. Usually, if things are very close to you, if I were to snap my fingers rudely right next to your ear, it would sound very sharp. But if I was on the other side of a room, it wouldn't sound as bright and sharp. So we want to emulate that effect by making the super long reverb even darker than the hall one that we had going. Now I'll send this one as well. I'm doing fine. I'm coming right back once I can burn my throne. I'm gonna make it even longer. Walk a mile, walk till you get to the eyes. So these two EQs on this reverb, one is EQing the signal heading into the reverb, and this diffusion network is functioning like a tonal balancer or an EQ heading out of the reverb as well. Thinking slows me down. In a place I thought I would know my way around. It's fine by me, all that life can be. Really long, right? There's this frequency buildup that keeps on happening, and that can be troublesome if you're using a vocal that has a lot of information happening in it. This vocal, there's some good space between phrases, but if you were to be working on a very upbeat song like a techno song or a punk song, this really long reverb, you'll probably find it doesn't quite fit with the style that you're working on. Well, let's turn this down, and another thing that we can do just to control the tail of it is, if you have a compressor, just a simple one, you can sidechain it to the vocal. And this way, as the vocalist is singing, the reverb will be turned down a bit. And as the vocalist stops singing between phrases, then the reverb tail will be allowed to come back up. So it won't get in the way of anything. And you can lengthen, let's move the attack up very fast so that it happens as soon as the vocal comes in. And then you can play with the release time so that either the reverb might come up very quickly after the vocal part finishes, or it might ease in. And I think I'd like it to ease in a little bit more, so I'm going to extend the release time. And I'm hearing a little bit of resonance in there too that I'd like to be rid of. Okay. Now you can hear that having a really smooth reverb usually involves using more than one reverb and thinking about how you want each of them to occupy a different part of the reverb space. The delay can serve the function of positioning the vocal within a certain space. You can have delay times that will make it sound as though the vocal is happening in a much smaller space versus a larger performing space. And then you can have a couple of reverbs. One that will serve the function of enhancing the spaciousness of the vocal, and then a very long one. The decay time on this additional reverb is around 10 seconds. And what you can do there is you can automate it. And I really recommend that you do that, where I think what I would do here is to automate the reverb for the chorus. So the verse vocal, where the song is a little bit more mellowed out, the vocal can sound a little bit closer, a little bit more contained. But then as we come into the chorus, this big reverb can help it to really just float and fly around in a really smooth way. That's what's happening here in the chorus now. If I turn that off, still sounds nice and spacious, but with the big one added, it's nice. And then as it comes back out of the chorus, I would automate it to turn it off. And that way you can have your reverbs transforming and shifting around a bit and maintaining the kind of smooth interrelation that it has with the vocal track. So try these out. Use a delay, send the delay into one of the reverbs, usually the shorter of the two, even though I'm using sort of a hall reverb that's about 2.5 seconds long on the decay. Then have an additional reverb that will just serve the purpose of enormity, and you'll have a really nice big reverb along with a hall-shaped reverb that will put the vocalist into a really enormous performing space. But having these on sends and adjusting the balance will enable you to position them as if they're a little bit behind the vocal and they won't get in the way. That way, you can play with your reverbs and have them shift around throughout, but the vocal will always remain at the front of the mix where it should be. Try this out.